Good day, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Medtech Business Academy Podcast, hosted by your Med-TeXperts. I am fortunate to be joined today, semi-fortunate to be joined, I guess, by our esteemed panel of lovely podcast experts here. We have Barbara Strain, the esteemed Barbara Strain, the esteemed Mike Verduti, and the OK Scott Alexander. So we think I
didn't have anything better to do this afternoon. So
we thank everybody for joining. One of the best parts of doing this podcast is that from time to time we have some incredible guests on, and each of these guests has an opportunity kind of to walk us through their story and seeing the industry from their eyes and their perspectives as it happened and as it is happening right now. And it always really is enlightening for not only us as Med-TeXperts, but also just everybody on the podcast. Most of the feedback that we get is always talking about the guests. Can we get more guests? Can we have more people share their stories? And today we have a great one, and I'm really excited to have him on. Today we're going to welcome Chat Razdan, who is the CEO and founder of Care+Wear, and Chat's going to walk us through his founder story. So with that, this is the Medtech Business Academy. Chat, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Great to see you guys.
Thanks for joining. We appreciate you taking the time. So the first question, I'm going to get right into it, is how does a Goldman Sachs investment banker that went to a third-rate school like University of Chicago, decide to make the transition into this med tech arena? How does that happen? Walk us through that.
Yeah, totally. And first, I'm glad you said U Chicago and not UVA, because Barbara was about to jump out of the screen and go right at you, because that's obviously a first-rate institution where I went undergrad. But I would say, I think, so my brief background, former strategy consultant, UVA undergrad, then went to business school in Chicago, like you mentioned. It might be a third-rate school in your mind, but it's the number one ranked school by pretty much every publication. So just wanted to throw that out there for you. And then swore I would never move back to New York and never do investment banking. So naturally ended up at Goldman, actually doing TMT investment banking, so tech, media, telecom. But I've always grown up in healthcare. My mother's an anesthesiologist. So I was that kid terrorizing all the nurses and doctors all throughout the hospital. And then I was a patient a number of times myself. I had a lot of ear infections as a kid. So I got tubes in my ears 3 times. And I always remember how terrible it felt to go to the hospital. Obviously, anytime you're going for surgery, it kind of stinks. I was a kid, I wasn't the cool kid. The cool kids were getting their tonsils removed and they were going on ice cream diets for like a week or 2. I was getting tubes placed in my ears, having an insane amount of pain, and then being given broccoli and cauliflower immediately after. So really was getting the short end of the stick there. But most importantly, was most disappointed and worried about exposing my backside to everyone in the hospital, because I knew everyone operating on me, right? Like any good mother, everyone operating on me had to be approved by her. So it had to be the best doctors and the best nurses. And they had all been to our house numerous times for dinner. And so I was most worried that they were going to see my backside and nothing would be the same. And so that was always at the back of my mind. And then back in 2014, I had friends and family diagnosed with cancer, getting treatment through PICC lines. So they had been told to wear socks to keep their PICC lines in place. And I just thought that's really strange. Like there's got to be something better than a sock. Started looking around. One of the good things about investment banking is it teaches you how to use Google really well. So I Googled around and couldn't find anything better than a sock. And so through some of our connections, got connected actually to the nursing team at UVA and then nurses and doctors at Johns Hopkins, and started working with them to try and create a better sock. And then accidentally was able to get on TV while we just had a paper napkin idea, and kind of realized as I was doing that this was something that I was much more passionate about. And at UVA, I'd always been very service oriented and kind of knew from day one that I wanted to make a bigger impact, I guess, in my life. And so just set about trying to create the better sock full time. And 10 years later, here we are with Care+Wear, trying to help every single patient and clinician with what they wear in and out of the hospital.
But it's not just socks, right? I mean, I love that.
No longer just our PICC line covers. We do a lot more now. But obviously, creating a better sock is at the forefront of what caused us to create the company.
I love it. And now you've kind of transformed it into this like truly health meets fashion type of organization. It's really on the cutting edge of fashion and activewear for both patients and for healthcare providers. So how did you decide that you're going to titrate up in that way? Like going from just, let me make PICC line covers to all of a sudden, I want to be a fashion entrepreneur.
Yeah, totally. And you've met me a number of times, you know that fashion is not in my middle name. But I think it kind of started with when we were doing the PICC line covers, a lot of the nurses that we were talking with kind of started talking to us about what their other cancer patients were dealing with. And then I remember going through the infusion center at Johns Hopkins and seeing people wearing no shirts, getting treatment through their ports. And I was like, this is kind of strange. And so then just started asking questions. I think one thing for those of you that know me that I'm pretty good at is being annoying and asking people questions anytime I see something. And so I annoyingly started bothering all the nurses and supply chain people about why is it this way? Why is it that way? And so learned that ports, you're sitting there getting treatment and historically you weren't given anything to really be able to access the port. And so that was why people were taking off their shirts. And then if they were lucky, wearing a blanket while feeling really cold. I actually just realized I'm wearing one of our early products was a polo shirt that has access to the port on either side. So when we saw that, I said, look, I love polo shirts. I want to create another polo shirt, but I want to make it look like a polo shirt. And so from far off, you can't even tell that these have zippers and these open up, and trying to just give a little more dignity to the patient and the hospital. And I think that's where, to your point on fashion, look, I don't know anything about fashion. I definitely didn't really know much about healthcare in the early days. I would argue I probably know less now than I did when I started the company, but wanted to get the right people in the room with me to design and develop our products. And I think that's where you just got to know what you're good at and what you're not good at. And I knew that I'm not good at designing products. And so I wanted to get the right people in the room with me. And that's kind of morphed into a three-pronged approach where first and foremost, always working with clinicians, right? Kind of who a lot of the amazing listeners are here today are people that truly are out there on the front lines helping save lives. And I think they understand better than anyone else why things are a certain way. And so what started as me innocently working with the teams at UVA and Johns Hopkins has kind of morphed into, on every product, working with clinicians to talk to them about why are you doing something the way you are? So when we ask them, why are you wearing a sock? Why aren't you wearing the LeBron James compression sleeve, for example, on your arm? They kind of talk to me about how the dressing, the Tegaderm, or I guess we shouldn't say brands, whatever dressing they were using on their arms was keeping the PICC line in place, actually needed airflow for it to function. And so you needed to have breathability. And then from a nursing perspective, you wanted to be able to tell if something was leaking pretty quickly. And so having visibility to the PICC line site was super important. And so it kind of just became an accident that we created a mesh window. But that accident actually became proprietary IP. And that was kind of when I learned every time you partner with clinicians, you can ensure that you're able to get proprietary IP on each and every one of your products. And then is bringing in the 7-year-old version of me, the actual patient or the actual clinician, to be involved in the design and development with the goal of them actually wanting to wear the product. And then lastly is bringing in that fashion and design background that I don't have, but working over the years, we've been really fortunate to work with brands like Oscar de la Renta, the Notori Company. We've actually taught a class at Parsons School of Design. We've been able to work with Tommy Hilfiger. It's been really, really incredible to work with some of the best and brightest at what they do and try and morph those all together into one amazing outcome.
So, Chet, go ahead. I'm sorry. So you had this great idea, right? And you wanted to vet it out. And you said that you got connected with Johns Hopkins right away to vet the idea. So my question is, how did you get connected with them? Because I think we all that have ideas would like to get a meeting like that to be vetted. And then where did that take you from there?
Yeah, I think that's where it's really important to have a loud mouth and tell everyone what you're working on. So one of the benefits of having a retired physician as a mother is she kind of has that intellectual curiosity that I've been either blessed or cursed at having as well. And so I told her about the idea of, hey, I see these people wearing socks on their arms. There's got to be something better. The day I told her, happened to be at a talk at her hospital where an oncologist from Hopkins was talking. So she went up to him after and said, hey, my son just told me about this idea. I thought it was pretty interesting. What do you think? And he said, here's my cell phone number. Please have your son call me. I then had 5 missed phone calls from my mom in like an hour. And I was like, what the heck is going on here? This is not good. And she was like, oh, this oncologist wants to talk to you. I'm like, Mom, this is not important. I can call him later. And that, I think that was kind of one of the first signs, though, was nurses and doctors that are already overworked, that already don't have any time, were really eager to help. In the early days, I would talk to them at like midnight or 1 a.m. when they would be done their shifts. They'd be done with all their family duties and all of that. And I think one thing you talk to any nurse and most of them are doing their job not because they're making billions of dollars. In fact, I don't know any nurse, unfortunately, that is. But they do it because they truly care about their patients. And I'd be remiss, by the way, to say Happy Nurses Month this month. It's pretty incredible what they do each and every day. And so I got really fortunate to work with amazing nurses that wanted to create a better outcome for their patients. And so just started talking to them. I think I ended up surveying over 1,000 nurses in that first few months to kind of see. And that's where it's really important to pick up the phone and call people. I think a lot of people, just to my earlier joke on Google, just want to go online, read research reports, etc. You can't do anything better than talking to someone on the front line, going and watching what they're doing, seeing what the issue is, what you can do better. And I think it was because I didn't come from healthcare, I had an unfair advantage of not knowing. And so not being ashamed to say, hey, I don't know what I'm doing. Please help me.
Right. So I was so happy when they said you are going to be on because I've known you almost throughout your whole sort of journey that you've been reviewing.
I had more hair. It wasn't gray. It was amazing.
we all just looked wonderful back then. But I want to get back to the collaboration part a little bit because you collaborated with so many named fashion experts and things. So how do you tell the audience how you kept your own identity in the face of collaborating? What did that really look like?
Yeah, it's a great question. First of all, I would say it's probably because we have such amazing partners that haven't said, hey, we're this big brand name that everyone knows, no one's ever heard of you, you have to do it our way. We had partners that were willing to listen, that were willing to take our feedback, and that were willing to work with us. And so, we started working, I think I first got to know Alex and Eliza at Oscar de la Renta in 2016. So at this time, I'm running, I think, a 1 or 2 person company. We have really hardly any sales, and you're talking about one of the most well-known brands in the world, and dealing directly with the CEO. Oscar actually had passed away from cancer himself. So this is something that is really personal to the company and to the brand. And being able to work directly with them and their designers and going back and forth with them on what are things that we want, what are things that I think are going to be important. At that time, for example, we were able to create a hoodie because Oscar, obviously very well known for their dresses, their blouses, their suits, you name it. They didn't have a competing hoodie. And so they were willing to work with us saying, hey, this is a product that we don't have in our collection. And it was just something super meaningful for them. But we also talked about how important it was to have warmth, to make sure that you feel warm inside the infusion center. We actually partnered with the University of Miami Sylvester Comprehensive Cancer Center to design those. And so got feedback from all of their patients and their staff. And I think one thing that is pretty remarkable, because a lot of fashion designers have a bad reputation for only wanting things their way, making things that aren't usable, et cetera. And at least with all the designers we've worked with, we've seen a desire to hear from the source. So when we designed our patient gowns as part of the class at Parsons School of Design, we actually had, they surveyed thousands of patients as part of the class, but we actually had patients come into every class and try on the gowns and give feedback, and patients with different types of issues or concerns. And it was pretty remarkable. I mean, we even had Kay Younger and Donna Karen come into the classroom, and they themselves were asking patients about everything and getting their feedback. And I think that's where it kind of gives you hope, I guess, for humanity, as cheesy as that is, that everyone wants to learn from others and wants to be able to do things together. And so, yeah, I can't say enough of the amazing partners we've been able to work with. And at the end of the day, it's them willing to listen and us willing to speak up, right? Like, you can't be shy with someone because, I laugh all the time because Nike, for example, always tells me, like, you know more than we do about hospitals. And I'm like, I promise you, Nike, I don't know more than you do in anything. But it's being on the floors, being in the hospitals, interacting with the clinicians. And Barbara actually knows a bunch of the initial team that helped us and served as advisors for us, surrounding yourself with clinicians that are on the floor each and every day, interacting with patients and being able to talk to them.
I think it speaks to the way that innovation happens, exactly what you've done, Chad, where you're out, you're talking to the end users, you're testing things out, you're figuring out what works, what doesn't work, right? And then you're making rapid changes.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about sort of the mindset that y'all take as you're thinking about expanding your line or interacting with folks? Like, how do you do that?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'd say it's definitely evolved to Skender's earlier comment of how have things changed over time. When I started the PICC line covers, we didn't get a sale to a hospital until a year later. Okay. I think, and one of those first hospitals was Barbara and UVA, who were willing to kind of take a bet. But it actually became my having to tell the nurse, like, hey, we have other hospitals ready to buy. Are you guys serious or not? Like, I'm a UVA alum. I want to be able to say that you were my first customer, but we have 2 other customers that are ready to go. And so you have to put yourself in an uncomfortable situation of kind of forcing a decision. I'm sure if Barbara was in her role today, I would get yelled at for having the nurse, selling to the nurse and not doing it through supply chain. But thankfully, she's no longer there anymore. So we're good. But all bad jokes aside, I think the other thing would be not just interacting with them, but sorry, could you ask your question again? I totally lost my train of thought.
Just talk about how you think about
innovation.
Process.
Yeah. So I think there's two sides of that. One is creating a product. So when you talk to a fashion designer, they normally have a final version of a product that they want to create. I look at it differently. I think about us as everyone that's listening today probably uses Gmail for their email. If you all remember, for the first 10 years of Gmail's existence, they actually had beta in their logo. So it literally said Gmail beta. And I think that's how we think about our products. My goal as the founder and CEO, and our entire team's philosophy is there's never such thing as a final version. We want to always be iterating on our products. So for the PICC line covers, for example, over the years, our mesh window in the PICC line site has actually become more transparent. For the nursing staff to be able to see the leakage and infection a little more easily. We've also added a silicone band at the top. At the early days, I was terrified of creating some sort of reason that a DVT would take place. And so I overemphasized that, I think. And so we created very loose PICC line covers. And so a lot of the clinicians were like, hey, you don't need to be this careful. And so we ended up being able to kind of work with them to create a silicone band to keep it on your arm. And then in terms of product development, today we have partners come to us and basically not only pitch us on wanting a product, but commit to purchasing the product. So Today we're working on 2 products with a couple of amazing hospital systems where they're paying for the product before we even begin production. And that, to me, tells me, wow, this is such a big problem that you're willing to pay. I think everyone on here knows hospitals never want to pay for anything, especially up front. So if they're willing to do that, that means that it's a real problem and a real need. And so that's a big driver for us. And then it's also what is complementary to us. I think that's really important. What is going to have a similar buyer, what's going to have someone that we can leverage the connections and relationships that we already have, and honestly, the knowledge, right? So over the years, we've built a number of products in the oncology space. We today have things for PICC covers, chest access ports. We have post-reconstructive surgery bras, et cetera, et cetera. And that's been really important for us as we've thought about product expansion, is what is ancillary to what we're doing, not what is completely to the right field or left field of what we have today.
So did you see? Go ahead.
Go ahead, Barbara.
I was just going to say, in regard to your last few comments, did you see a noticeable difference, or did you have to pivot differently during those pandemic years? But are you seeing like those 2 particular hospitals or other coming to you? Do you think that's a way of them sort of doing something different post COVID?
Yeah, I think I gained a much stronger appreciation for supply chain during COVID, that's for sure. Just seeing all the stuff that was being thrown at them and all the work that they were doing. We had a partner at a very large hospital system who was my first call every day at 5 a.m. and my last call every day at 2 a.m. And we got to know each other very well for the first 6 months of COVID, where we spoke 5 times a day. What we did during the pandemic that I think transformed the company for us is we actually started helping hospitals procure PPE. So our factories actually were already FDA approved PPE producers, and just dumb luck for us, candidly. I wish I could tell you I'd strategically planned that in 2014. I definitely had not. But these factories were already manufacturing it. And so when hospitals came to us saying, hey, we need this, we could, with open eyes, say, oh, our factories actually are already creating that. We can get that for you. And oh, by the way, we're going to take a 20% margin on this. We're not really worried about profit. We just need to leave the lights on. But when the world comes back to normal, and I guess now we're quote unquote normal, when the world comes back, we want a seat at the table. And so we made that bet in 2020. I still remember that first weekend where I think I cold email. I was like, oh, let's see if hospitals actually care about this. Cold emailed probably 40 CEOs and had phone calls with 200 of them in that first weekend, and literally had to start hanging up on hospital CEOs that never used to reply to me, just saying, hey guys, like I have people that need to place an order. When you're ready, call me. Otherwise, I got to go. But we as a company, we ended up, I guess, being the fourth fastest growing company in America, according to the Financial Times during the pandemic. And I think what I saw there during the pandemic, obviously hospitals were forced to make decisions very quickly. You either said yes or no, and you started wiring money over pretty immediately because every factory was taking money up front. But I think what we saw is building out that trust and relationship. And what we did that I think helped a lot is we actually said no. So a great example, a big hospital system wanted us to manufacture 100 million nitrile gloves a year for a 5-year contract. And you can tell by the way I even say nitrile that we know nothing about gloves and nitrile gloves. And so there were all these factories manufacturing it. I had connections that would go in Thailand and Vietnam and China to the actual factory, take pictures and send it to them so we could tell them, hey guys, this doesn't look good. One hospital wanted us to make N95 masks. We didn't know anything about N95 masks, and so we actually connected them with the factory directly that was making them and had someone go there with them to just oversee everything. But we said, we're not going to be a part of this because we can't put our brand name at the end of it. But things like an isolation gown, which leveraged a lot of the lessons we had learned from patient gowns, we could do really well. We ended up doing over 1 million gowns for the city of New York, where we're based, which was really special for our team to be able to help everyone in our home city. Helped a lot of different governments out with what they needed. And I think today, because of all that work, hospitals are more eager to work with us and to give us a shot.
Foundationally, in the beginning, right, your idea was, let's make a better product, more comfortable. People want to be proud to wear this.
Yeah.
And then you're throwing around names like Oscar de la Renta.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking this is healthcare and there's costs involved and outcomes involved and there's competitors. So how did you do all that and still remain competitive and, get people to buy this? And are you more expensive and how do you justify it?
Yeah, it's a great question. So the short answer is my goal from day one has always been to create the brand that everyone can afford. Growing up in a household with a doctor who took care of every patient, not certain patients, not particular ones. That was something that was core to our mission, to our DNA. We as a company give 10% of our profit back to nonprofits with the goal of being able to help those that aren't in need. And so what we did from day one is always priced our products at what you're paying for today in the hospital or less than what you're paying for today. So the PICC line covers, Barbara's team was really kind and let us know what they pay for the tube sock looking product, and Johns Hopkins had done the same. And now when we manufacture a new product, we actually will talk to the hospital directly and say, what are you paying for it today? And we kind of work backwards to make sure that financially it's feasible. That, I think, is, to your point, healthcare over the years is spending less, not more. Everyone has just spent multiple billions of dollars during the pandemic that were unplanned and not expected. And so it's even more important today than it was 5 years ago to be able to come up with a solution that is going to be, from day one, positive cash flow for the hospital. And then we do things like our patient gowns, for example. Your traditional gown, ours will last probably 3 to 5 times longer than the traditional gown. Every product we have is designed for over 50 washes. Our gowns are designed for over 75. Most patient gowns today last 2 to 4 washes. And so even if ours are being taken out of circulation earlier, it's not because of the product. It's more because people will throw things away just to throw things away, et cetera.
Chat, you referenced something early on in your development process. You talked about getting in front of and talking and doing a high survey of those end users.
Yeah.
Just sitting back. And I'm always surprised when we talk to early stage entrepreneurs that do exactly what you said not to do, which is just Googling or speaking to one person or two people, right? I'm just curious, given the fact that you've already kind of explained that proclivity to get as many answers from the end users as possible, why do you think that exists in this industry that has so much writing on everything? Why do you think they don't talk to people?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I mean, my gut would be, one, we're in a world where we want instant success and we want instant gratification. And so if you hear one person tell you, hey, this is a problem, you're like, great, I agree, let's go solve this. I think that's bad and good, right? Like, obviously it's bad, you're not getting a ton of feedback, but it's great in terms of you're building something to be able to get feedback, right? Like what I didn't say is our PICC line cover went through 12 iterations in the early days before it was ready to actually be sold and get into prime time. Some of those were manufacturing lessons. Some of them were lessons of even when we were talking to nurses and doctors, not having a solution. I mean, I remember, I think it was like the second or third prototype, we had a sleeve without the window. We just had a normal sleeve, kind of looks like a compression running sleeve, but without the compression. Take it to Johns Hopkins. I'm super excited. I'm like, oh my God, we've got the greatest solution. They're like, this is the coolest thing ever. We will never use this or buy this. And I'm just like, what the hell did I just waste all this time doing? And then thankfully I had enough. My ego's big, but wasn't big enough to say, okay, what is this missing? Why won't you ever use this? And so that's when it came out that they needed the breathability and visibility. And being from Baltimore, I kind of just jokingly said, well, how about if we made it like a lacrosse stick with a mesh? And that's when we ended up coming up with our mesh window. And so I think the real answer is you don't need to go out and survey 1 million people. I think on the opposite end, especially when you talk to med tech companies, like the big guys, they will create all these focus groups where you're getting a ton of people together. Skender, actually, I think your company helps people do these with focus groups and all that. So everyone, you should pay them to do that. But when you're an early stage startup and you don't have that cash, it's a lot of money to do a focus group. And so picking up the phone, going and walking to people, I think is really important, and like hacking ways, I guess, to get that feedback. And then again, realizing that what you create is probably not going to be the final version. I think the second thing, to go to your second half of the question, is for people not in healthcare, they're always frustrated at the sales cycle for hospitals and getting into healthcare. And I think the difference that you have to remember, and it's taken me I still don't appreciate it, but I appreciate it more, is if you're creating the next Microsoft Excel, worst case scenario, you create a program that crashes and whatever document you were working on, you have to restart. It's probably a few hours lost productivity, et cetera. If you're creating something in healthcare, worst case scenario, you could actually create something that causes someone to die. And so I think that's what you have to remember when you're interacting with supply chain and clinicians and you're going through 9 billion committees. And after it's approved by all 9 billion, you go to 10 billion more, is the fact that this could have a really profound outcome that no one ever wants. And I think that that's something as a founder that we oftentimes forget, and people, especially not from healthcare, really don't appreciate.
I mean, one of the things that I think is coming up too is this idea of talking to a lot of folks is very important. And I would just offer up that if you can't get people's attention, to have a conversation with them about, hey, how do we make your practice, your life, your whatever better? You're probably not going after a problem that's really worth solving, or maybe it's the wrong audience. But like if people aren't interested in your concept to even sort of cogitate about like, hey, wouldn't it be cool if, I would take that as maybe a yellow flag of like, maybe this isn't something that's really going to move the needle as it relates to putting a dent in the universe.
Yeah, no, totally. I think that's it's really well said, and something that, again, part of the reason why we want to have people like hospitals and clinicians involved from day one.
And I think when idea is going to catch fire, right? And when you really have a good idea, it's when you're not having to talk to a lot of people for them to say it's a good idea, right? So if you start talking to 5, 10, 15, 20 people and they're respected people and they're not seeing it, I mean, at some point you got to realize you don't have anything. Whereas you were seeing positivity right away with the idea, correct?
Yeah, but I mean, I learned actually the hard way that I wasn't necessarily talking to the actual people making the purchasing decisions. I was talking to people that would be users of the product, but wouldn't be the ones actually telling the Barbaras of the world, hey, we need to buy this. And so part of what has evolved for us is having the actual decision maker be a part of that investigative process from the early days to make sure that, like Scott said, it's a problem that people are passionate about, but it's a problem that they're passionate about enough to actually want to pay for as well.
Just out of curiosity, Barbara, if he would have approached you back then, right? Because he said he circumvented you. Would there have been, what would you have done at that point?
Well, we did sit down several times with a cup of coffee and had a discussion. So what I was going to jump in and say...
Barbara's a bad example because she is very open to everyone and everything.
I was going to see if maybe Barbara was using the hot coffee to throw at you for going around her.
I was going to say the thing about Chat that our audience should really pick up on, if they haven't already, is he's a great listener. And so he wants to know what you think. He wants to know what that process is. And so that's what we would do. We would sit down and we'd have a cup of coffee, wasn't throwing it at him, but we'd have these great conversations. And I said, okay, now I understand what folks do I need to bring to the table? How do we need to look at this? And how did we really approach it from the way we normally do value analysis, identifying that need, and then what was the process? But it's bringing people together. And I think he's exemplifying that, but he's a great listener. So there's a lot of folks out there that think they're listeners, but they talk too much and they don't really get that input from that customer, potential customer. So I wanted to throw him that bone that we did sit down, we did talk. He didn't really, he's making it the circumventing sound like he was a devil, but it really wasn't. When you go to the
cool.
people,
I said, I have to look cool to the listeners.
He does. And I noticed that in one of your biographies, somebody said you were called Smiley in school.
Yeah.
Because
he does a lot of that. I could never get in trouble. I would try.
But I think, he's got a lot of great points for any one of our audience all along the way. And one of the questions I was going to ask, just a little mix there, because I know we're getting close to the end and wrapping up pretty soon. But with your background in business and finance, did you find it easier? Were you confident, overconfident? How did you really advise folks about learning about that or getting someone on board that's really good about certain aspects?
Yeah, totally. Great question. One thing, all bad jokes aside, I think, like Barbara said, I was definitely talking to the nurses and doctors much more, but she was involved in identifying the nurses and doctors that I should get connected to and getting me meetings with them. And even on things that UVA didn't buy on day one, she was putting me in touch with the people that she said, hey, if you get this person excited, then that's good. Like basically, if you work with your supply chain team, you can make their jobs easier and your job easier at the same time. In terms of I totally just didn't do
business
a good job.
Background.
Yes,
your
business. Yeah, so I think it's actually helpful in that. So a couple things. One, I don't come from the fashion industry either. So it's a dual negative and dual positive at the same time, because you talk to anyone in fashion, and if our team listens to this, they're going to get very annoyed at me, because anyone from fashion will tell you pay factories up front, right? Like that's just how companies are built. You talk to part of why direct-to-consumer companies are getting hit from a valuation perspective is they buy all this inventory and then they need to figure out how to sell it. For us, we took an opposite approach where we wanted to get paid before we paid our manufacturers. And so that's been really core to creating the company. And so understanding working capital. At my time at Goldman, we dealt with a lot of companies that were spending cash before they had the cash. And that was something that I really wanted to make sure we didn't do. I think the second piece that probably helped was the confidence that you get from getting yelled at repeatedly as an analyst and as an associate in consulting and banking, but still being put in a room with Fortune 500 CEOs and pretending you know what you're doing, so that when you're talking to hospital leaders, you can kind of portray that, I think is really important. And then I think the third thing, candidly, is being upfront with people when things don't work out or when you don't know the answer, having them work with you together to find the right answer. In our early days, our first pick cover ended up having, interestingly, it didn't have the issue at UVA, but at a couple other hospitals, the black on our pick line covers was pilling off on the dressing, similar to how if you're wearing like a woolen sweater, some of the wool will pill off onto your other clothing. And I just remember I didn't know why it was happening. We, in fact, were very upfront with those hospitals saying, hey, we're washing the fabric. We're testing it ourselves. UVA hasn't had this issue with anyone. And what we learned is for when we were taking it, we were actually washing it ourselves before we would put it on. But when you would send the garment to a hospital, they weren't putting it through their laundry. And so that was causing the pilling. And so the solution that we found out together with those couple of hospitals was make sure that they wash it after they actually create the full pick cover before packaging it and sending it. And I think they appreciated that I told them up front, I have no idea why this is happening. And obviously we tested it out 9 billion times. We gave ourselves plenty of heart attacks and all that. But then going to them and being transparent that we need to work together to solve this gets them to want to help you and want to work with you more so.
Great. Well, we're approaching the peak of our time here, so I think we're just going to do a wrap up and give everybody a chance to kind of give their thoughts on the segment. Scott, you want to lead us off?
Yeah, I'd love to. I mean, I think chat's great to have you here. Thank you for coming. It's my big takeaway from the conversation is the need to go out and talk to the end users, understand needs, translate it into prototypes, go back, get your teeth kicked in because you did something wrong. Rinse and repeat until you have something that people are really fired up about. And that's the story that I heard. And it's exciting and refreshing because, I mean, at the end of the day, it's a fairly straightforward process. People just need to do it. And I'm glad that you have had the great success that you have as a result of doing what we all know to do. Go talk to people and give them what they want.
Good.
Customer's always right.
Yeah.
So, Chad, I really, really enjoyed this whole session, learning from you and hearing your story. I think my favorite part, as we're taping this, it's going to be Mother's Day coming up very shortly. Yeah. And it was just fascinating to me how your mom really was instrumental in that first meeting with Hopkins. And my mom's been instrumental in my success as well. So congratulations to you and all your success, and happy Mother's Day to our audience.
Love it, Mike. Barbara is his first customer.
It's just so great to have you on. We keep touching base off and on. And if you're not following on LinkedIn, please do it. He's a great giver back to and being a mentor. And he gets young entrepreneurs and things together. He just has the whole package where he listens. He finds out what is really important to folks. willing to have that transparency, and just a really nice, smiley guy. But it was great having you here and learning how you've really succeeded and how you continue to build on that and not take so many chunks out of things, and you want to make sure that it's centric to your main goals and themes and things. So appreciate and good seeing you.
Yeah, you as well. And again, Barbara is the reason we're here today. So forever grateful.
Great. From my perspective, I actually just had a talk with somebody 2 weeks ago where I was talking about this concept of intelligent ignorance. And it's something that I think the most powerful entrepreneurs, the greatest minds from Edison, all those inventors exhibit in some capacity. The confidence to be ignorant, to admit that you don't know, and to approach it with a highly intelligible just way of trying to fact find and basically break out. And the fact that you did that, and then the second part of that is iteration. Right? Understanding that you're not going to hit your MVP on your first one. And you're not going to hit your MVP on your second one. You want to in some capacity, but you can get there and just not having the despondency to feel that you failed, but knowing that. So I applaud you and all your growth and success. Chat, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on. Thank you for making the time. We'll give you the final word.
Yeah, no, thank you all so much for what you do for the industry and how you help inspire others to keep bringing about change. I think there's so much we can do together. And for those of you listening, if any of you wear scrubs, feel free to get them at our website, www.careandwear.com. You always got to be selling after all. But also, if we could ever help any of your organizations or patients or loved ones, everyone on our team, I'm really blessed, has a personal story and a reason for being there. And we're excited to keep trying to do even more in healthcare. And our goal as a company is to help all 8+ billion people around the world with what they wear in and out of the hospital. And we're definitely not going to stop doing that until at least we're doing that.
Love it. Chat, thanks a lot. Thank you to everybody listening. As always, please make sure to listen to our sister podcast as well, Women in MedTech. And we are excited for everybody that listens. We appreciate you. And thank you. Keep listening. And thank you, everybody, once again. Happy Mother's Day when this does come out.
Thanks, y'all. Thanks, Mom.
Thank you.